The studio did not want me. They felt that and they were right, that I was not of an equal stature to Paul Newman.
While the peers of his era flared hot and burned out, Robert Redford remained measured, poised, and almost impenetrably private. Dubbed the Gentleman of New Hollywood, he managed to preserve both his integrity and mystique in a town that devours both. He never aired grievances, never courted headlines, and never traded in tabloid spectacle. But now, at 88, Robert Redford has finally named the 7 actors he hated the most. Today, we'll delve into the story of a man who spent his life building art while navigating personalities who didn't always want the same thing. Let's get started. Gene Hackman, the sledgehammer in a violin shop. In 1969, Downhill Racer brought together 2 rising stars of American cinema, Robert Redford and Gene Hackman. Redford, already gaining recognition for his composed screen presence and artistic ambition, played David Chapelet, a fiercely competitive skier striving for Olympic glory. Hackman, who had recently broken out in 1967's Bonnie and Clyde, appeared in a supporting role as Redford's coach. On paper, it was a promising pairing. But behind the scenes, the collaboration would prove short-lived and deeply strained. Redford, who also produced Downhill Racer, had spent years championing the film. Shot primarily in Austria and Switzerland on a lean budget, it was directed by Michael Ritchie, with whom Redford shared a vision for stripped-down, character-driven storytelling. Redford approached the role with precision, favoring minimal rehearsal, trusting the structure of the script, and respecting the chain of production. Hackman, on the other hand, was known for his combustible energy and an often adversarial relationship with directors, crew members, and co-stars. He was emotionally raw, instinctual, and famously unfiltered. These traits made his performances electric, but his presence volatile. The cultural and behavioral contrast between the 2 actors became evident almost immediately. Redford, who had honed his craft in theater and television before transitioning to film, believed in quiet control, technical discipline, and teamwork. Hackman, a former Marine and drama school classmate of Dustin Hoffman, could explode with fury in one moment, then fall into dead silence the next. A crew member from the Downhill Racer set later remarked that working with Hackman was like handling a live wire in wet gloves. During a shoot in Wengen, Switzerland, where the crew was racing against failing winter light to capture a key scene, Hackman, unhappy with how he was being lit for an exterior dialogue shot, refused to exit his trailer. The lighting issue, minor by most accounts, dragged on for over an hour as the crew and director tried to coax him out. Eventually, Redford walked directly to Hackman's trailer and confronted him. He said plainly, "We're burning daylight. Either you come out now, or we move on without the shot." Hackman, visibly angered, stormed out and performed the scene, but not without tossing the script pages in the snow between takes. Clearly, the 2 men respected each other's talents, but had no functional chemistry off camera. Redford later described Hackman as a sledgehammer in a violin shop, a brilliant performer who had no interest in collaboration, and whose methods, while effective, were often disruptive. While Downhill Racer was ultimately well-received critically and would go on to influence future sports dramas like Chariots of Fire and Moneyball, the working dynamic between Redford and Hackman left a bitter aftertaste. The fallout from Downhill Racer was swift and final. The 2 actors never collaborated again in any capacity, not in film, television, or even industry events. According to production notes from later Redford projects like The Candidate and All the President's Men, Hackman's name occasionally came up during early casting talks, but Redford vetoed him each time. When asked years later in a New York Times interview if he would ever consider working with Hackman again, Redford paused and said, "Gene's a genius on screen, no doubt, but I'd never put a crew through that again." Hackman's career, of course, flourished independently. He won 2 Academy Awards, Best Actor for The French Connection and Best Supporting Actor for Unforgiven, and starred in over 80 films before retiring from acting in 2004. Redford, meanwhile, built his legacy not only as an actor and director, but also as the founder of the Sundance Film Festival, where he championed emerging voices and collaborative storytelling. While there was never a public feud between the two men, those close to both described their relationship as non-existent. They never spoke about each other at award shows, never shared the stage at retrospectives or festivals, and never appeared in interviews together. It was, by all accounts, a deliberate distance, fueled not by hostility, but by deep, creative incompatibility. Hackman reportedly once told a biographer that Redford liked things too clean, while Redford told a Vanity Fair contributor that Hackman never met a rule he didn't try to break. But this was not by any means a one-of-a-kind story. There's more from where that came. James Woods, Never Ever. Though they never shared the screen or collaborated on a completed film, the tension between Robert Redford and James Woods is one of the more quietly notorious rifts in Hollywood's casting history. Despite Woods' formidable talent, Redford made a private but firm decision to keep the actor as far away from his creative spaces as possible. In 1974, during early casting sessions for 3 Days of the Condor, Redford, who had acquired substantial creative control by this point in his career, was directly involved in casting decisions for his films, especially those he produced through his Wildwood Enterprises banner. Woods, then a rapidly rising talent known for his stage work and bit parts in television, was called in to audition for the role of a CIA analyst alongside Redford's lead character, Joseph Turner. The reading was expected to be brief and technical, but it quickly veered off script. According to two production staffers who later recounted the session in a 1990 oral history of Condor, Woods used the opportunity to interrogate the film's underlying politics. The movie, adapted from James Grady's novel 6 Days of the Condor, dealt with themes of surveillance, covert operations, and American interventionism. During the audition, Woods began to argue, not about the scene, but about the broader implications of U.S. policy in Vietnam. He launched into a spirited critique of what he saw as Hollywood's hypocrisy and the script's naive liberalism. Redford, a staunch opponent of the Vietnam War and a vocal critic of U.S. foreign policy throughout the 1970s, initially tried to steer the conversation back to the audition material, but Woods pressed on. Within minutes, Redford walked out of the room, reportedly muttering, "This is not what we're here to debate." That moment solidified Redford's stance on Woods. In internal casting notes dated February 1974, archived in studio paperwork from Paramount Pictures, Redford's production team scribbled "Never Ever" in block letters next to Woods' name. From that point onward, Woods' name would occasionally surface during casting rounds. He was floated for parts in All the President's Men, Brubaker, and Legal Eagles, but each time, Redford issued a quiet veto. The ideological chasm between the two men only widened as their careers advanced. Redford, often described as the conscience of Hollywood's liberal elite, became increasingly associated with political activism. He supported environmental initiatives, produced documentaries on American injustice, and even considered a Senate run in the early 1990s. Woods, by contrast, grew more outspoken in his conservatism, often railing against what he perceived as a stifling leftist orthodoxy in the entertainment industry. By the late 1990s and into the 2000s, Woods had positioned himself as one of the few openly conservative actors in Hollywood. In interviews over the years, Woods occasionally made oblique references to the missed opportunity of working with Redford. In a 1989 Los Angeles Times interview, he said, "There are certain clubs you're not invited into if you don't nod in agreement. Redford's house? I'm not even allowed on the street." When asked directly in a 2006 Esquire profile whether there was a blacklist against him in Hollywood, Woods quipped, "Let's just say Robert Redford doesn't have me on speed dial." Redford, for his part, never addressed Woods by name in public statements, interviews, or memoirs. He did not want to dignify what he considered performative antagonism, as one Sundance staffer put it. Behind the scenes, however, Redford's aversion to Woods was deeply felt. Even during the late 1980s, when Woods was enjoying critical acclaim with roles in Salvador and Bestseller, Redford continued to exclude him from casting considerations for films like A River Runs Through It and Quiz Show. In Sundance Institute records from the early 1990s, his name appears only once in a list of suggested instructors to avoid for acting labs. Dustin Hoffman, one iconic film, one frustrating collaboration. When All the President's Men premiered in Washington, D.C. on April 6, 1976, it was hailed as a masterclass in political cinema. This film, starring Robert Redford as Bob Woodward and Dustin Hoffman as Carl Bernstein, not only helped shape public memory of the Watergate scandal, but also featured two of the era's most celebrated actors at an artistic crossroads. Behind the polished final cut lay a creative tension between Redford's disciplined vision and Hoffman's improvisational boldness. Redford believed in meticulous preparation. He drove the authenticity of the film by collaborating closely with director Alan J. Pakula and screenwriter William Goldman, painstakingly researching the inner workings of the Washington Post, even architecting the newsroom set in Burbank with replicas of Post desks, which cost $500 each, and actual trash bins sourced directly from the paper. With a modest production budget of $8.5 million, the film would go on to gross $70.6 million, earning a place in the National Film Registry in 2010. Hoffman, however, arrived with a creative ethos shaped by his breakout success in The Graduate and Midnight Cowboy. He immersed himself in the role of Bernstein, and even attended a family Passover Seder with the real journalist and borrowing Bob Woodward's watch on set. While this deep dive earned praise for its authenticity, it also disrupted Redford's tightly choreographed approach. The clearest example of their creative friction emerged during a key newsroom phone call sequence. Hoffman repeatedly reshaped his performance during takes, each time varying his tone, pacing, and even inserting unscripted dialogue. This forced Redford, who was playing a reaction-driven Woodward, to constantly recalibrate his own performance. After 7 such takes, Redford snapped. Striving to maintain flow, Redford was seething as Hoffman drifted further from the structure they had established. As Pakula later reflected, their styles, Redford's methodical and Hoffman's improvisational, represented a friction that often resulted in long delays. Despite the tension, there was mutual professional respect. Hoffman credited Redford for shaping the film's direction, saying his decision to remove personal backstories in favor of narrative focus made all the difference. Redford, in turn, admired Hoffman's dedication, even calling him earthy, intelligent, sensitive. After All the President's Men, the pair never collaborated again. Redford declined retrospective reunion panels and avoided projects that would require extended joint promotion. While there was no public animosity, the unsaid agreement was clear. Their temperaments had simply misaligned. Redford, wary of unpredictable creative detours, bypassed any opportunity for future partnership, content to let the film speak for itself. Tom Cruise. Collision over collaboration. The 2007 political drama, Lions for Lambs, stands as a rare moment when Robert Redford, already established as a thoughtful actor-director, and Tom Cruise, one of Hollywood's most electrifying stars, attempted collaboration and failed spectacularly. Directed by Redford and co-starring Cruise, Meryl Streep, Michael Pena, and Andrew Garfield, the film was shot under a tight 8-month schedule. With a production budget of $35 million, Lions for Lambs sought to address U.S. foreign policy, but its box office performance, garnering just $63.2 million worldwide, proved underwhelming. Behind the scenes, the real drama stemmed from a creative clash that would permanently fracture any potential partnership between Redford and Cruise. Redford originally approached the project with a clear artistic mission: to craft a stripped-down contemplative critique of institutional failure. As he told Rotten Tomatoes, he felt that the film should center on the guys and their effort to do the right thing, not sensationalize geopolitical villains. Filming began on January 29, 2007, in locations that included a reconstructed Afghan plateau near Simi Valley, California, with production design emulating remote mountain ridges. Redford favored controlled, intimate scenes over spectacle, a contrast to Cruise's marquee presence. Cruise, meanwhile, approached his role as Senator Jasper Irving with a different mindset. Having built his reputation on roles in blockbuster franchises and intensely stylized performances, he treated Lions for Lambs as a branding opportunity. In interviews, Cruise described Derek Irving as someone he had to immerse into by delving into modern government, conservative thought, and current foreign affairs. He even brought his own PR and image team to set, insisting his physical presentation, including his wardrobe, posture, and even his silhouette, align with his polished public persona. His dedication to optics was consistent with his status at the time. Cruise was emerging from a public image slump and was acutely aware of maintaining a commanding screen presence. These competing creative priorities led to frequent on-set disruptions. Crew members recall stylist standby teams altering lighting setups mid-shot to flatter Cruise. Multiple script revisions were made to heighten Irving's charisma, shifting focus from narrative depth to punchier dialogue. Redford's patience eroded as he watched scenes reorient from institutional critique to personal redemption. By the third week of filming, he confronted the direction head-on. One assistant recalled him leaning in during a take, whispering to Cruise, "Are we acting or are we selling a campaign ad?" Post-production only deepened the divide. Cruise's team demanded multiple cuts of his scenes, meticulously policing pacing and reaction shots to maximize his presence. Sources say studio executives ultimately sided with Cruise, overruling Redford's editorial control. For Redford, this move represented the final breach of creative trust. He delivered the completed film, but from opening day, he distanced himself. He declined the majority of press events, including premiere interviews and marketing campaigns. For a project he considered philosophically compromised, Redford said later that it felt like one of the most frustrating projects of his career. The film's outcome reflected the fault lines in its production. Grossing only $63 million on a $35 million budget signaled a financial disappointment. Critics were blunt. The Guardian described it as poorly timed, dull, inert, school-teacherly, while Fox News labeled it problematic and a likely huge money loser. Industry observers noted that Cruise's PR-heavy approach, though intended to elevate the film's political discourse, instead underscored an ideological collision. While Redford aimed for sober critique, Cruise leaned toward a scripted redemption narrative. The two never collaborated again. Redford maintained a discreet silence about Cruise in interviews and retrospectives, opting instead to let Lions for Lambs fade into obscurity rather than comment further. Cruise moved on to other projects through his United Artists and Cruise Wagner Productions partnership, including 2008's Valkyrie. But the philosophical schism remained. Their clash was neither personal vendetta nor tabloid scandal. It was an unbridgeable creative divergence. Redford refused to entangle his production identity with a film he felt had been hijacked by image-first impulses. Cruise, meanwhile, pocketed a performance praised for its charisma, even if its context felt discordant with Redford's intent. Redford's commitment to thematic authenticity and cautious narration collided with Cruise's emphasis on optics and market resonance. The result was a fractured set, a compromised film, and a creative rupture that neither party has revisited since. The duo's failure to reconcile those priorities reflects the enduring truth that sometimes collaboration collides, not because actors can't share a screen, but because they can't share a vision. Faye Dunaway, Perfectionism Meets Restraint. Although 3 Days of the Condor remains a compelling political thriller in the canon of 1970s cinema, with a $7.8 million budget and a gross of $41.5 million in US and Canada theatrical rentals, behind the scenes, the famously intense on-screen interactions between Robert Redford and Faye Dunaway masked almost complete off-screen disconnection. In a film where Redford's CIA analyst Joe Turner takes Dunaway's Kathy Hale hostage, the palpable tension seen on screen mirrored the creative friction behind the camera. Dunaway arrived with a reputation as one of Hollywood's most exacting performers following Bonnie and Clyde and Chinatown. Her devotion to craft translated into frequent demands on set. She routinely requested line rewrites, lighting adjustments, and revisited performance choices night after night. Sources close to the production report that she'd even arrange callbacks to run through scenes again, slowing the shooting schedule. Known for perfectionism, Dunaway approached set work like a battleground, carefully shaping each syllable and visual frame. Redford, by contrast, believed in trusting collaborators. He preferred to maintain momentum, avoid overanalysis, and preserve the raw authenticity of performance. One script supervisor remembered him admonishing the cast and crew, "We're here to find truth, not micromanage every syllable into submission." Tension boiled during a closed-door meeting between director Sidney Pollack, Redford, and Dunaway, convened to dissect the emotional logic behind Kathy's climactic confrontation scene. Dunaway, insisting on unpacking her character's subtleties, questioned every motivational beat. Redford, having rehearsed the scene with military-like precision, grew impatient. He leaned in and snapped, "It's espionage, Faye, not Chekhov." The room fell silent. Dunaway stormed out. Though she returned to set the next day, many crew members later said the emotional chill never thawed. Their creative disconnect wound into the shooting itself. To capture Dunaway's final scene in Kathy's apartment, Redford relied on a body double for insert shots immediately after Dunaway wrapped her scenes. If this sounds odd, that's because it was. This was a very unusual move, necessitated by the emotional and logistical distance between the leads. They never rekindled their working relationship. No post-release interviews, no retrospectives, no reunion panels. In Redford's later brief comment on his relationship with Dunaway, he said, "She's unforgettable," but this was not an invitation to reconnect. Despite earning critical praise, with Roger Ebert hailing the film as tense and involving, the movie's internal harmony never matched its narrative cohesion. Dunaway's unrelenting demand for control and Redford's insistence on disciplined flow set the production on a collision course from day one. It wasn't about clashing egos, it was about fundamentally different artistic philosophies. Even though both actors delivered career-defining performances, they never worked together again. There was no scandal, no public feud, just a mutual understanding that their creative energies were incompatible. The industry quietly accepted it. Dunaway continued her career with iconic roles in Network and Mommy Dearest, while Redford carried forward his understated on-screen presence and growing focus on directing and producing. 3 Days of the Condor shows us what can happen when inside chemistry fails to align with on-screen chemistry. Their scenes together crackle with urgency, but off-screen, the professional distance shaped performance and perhaps helped contribute to the film's raw suspense. It remains one of the rare moments in American cinema where the magic visible on screen was powered by tension palpable just beneath the surface. But wait, we're not done with Robert Redford's feuds just yet. Robert Duvall, Chaos versus Calibration. The Natural, released on May 4, 1984, is frequently remembered for its mythic visuals and triumphant soundtrack. Directed by Barry Levinson and produced on a $28 million budget, the film earned $48 million at the box office, secured 4 Academy Award nominations, including Best Supporting Actress for Glenn Close, and introduced Randy Newman's iconic Copland-esque score. At its heart stood Robert Redford as Roy Hobbs and Robert Duvall as shrewd sports writer Max Mercy. You probably already guessed it. The two figures were at creative odds off-screen. Robert Redford, returning to lead roles after a 3-year hiatus, approached Roy Hobbs with disciplined craftsmanship. Scenes were planned meticulously, rehearsed to perfection, and filmed largely at Buffalo's war-torn War Memorial Stadium in 1983. with all High Stadium doubling for Wrigley Field. He immersed himself in the role, ensuring each beat aligned with a larger narrative arc that evoked American myth and redemption. Redford's philosophy favored structured rhythms, precise blocking, and an almost symphonic progression of scenes, with each piece integral to the whole. Opposite him, Robert Duvall, cast as the cynical journalist Max Mercy, brought an improvisational ethos forged through years of stage and screen experience. With roots in the neighborhood playhouse and early TV work, Duvall embraced a documentarian approach. Minimal rehearsal, reactive presence, and character truth emerging through spontaneity. As he once explained, talking and listening drive authentic performance. Initially, Redford admired Duvall's raw authenticity. Crew members noted that Mercy's unscripted tonal shifts and Duvall's instinctive line variations imbued scenes with unpredictability, a mirroring of the fractured journalism world Hobbs inhabited. Redford told his production team he respected Duvall's electricity but warned that it could threaten the film's tightly tuned narrative. But the friction grew palpable as Duvall began altering dialogue and pacing mid-shoot. One account recounts how Duvall consistently rewrote the tone of Mercy's scenes in his makeup chair, shifting tempos and layering sarcasm that differed from the film's arc. Without warning, he would step off script, lean into silence, or punctuate lines with ad-libs. Redford, like a conductor seeing cues slide, found his own carefully crafted performance unsettled, sometimes utterly thrown off balance. Tension reached its apex during a crucial confrontation scene, scripted to reflect Hobbs's inner reckoning. As the cameras rolled, Duvall refused to adhere to Redford and Levinson's framed emotional beats. He quipped sarcastically mid-take, undercutting the somber tone Redford had planned. Redford, breaking character, stopped the scene and confronted him. "It's not your movie." Duvall fired back, icy calm. "It's not anyone's until it's real." Production records and crew affirmed this exchange lasted nearly 15 minutes. Though the scene eventually resumed and the film was completed on schedule, the personal rift remained. Redford's post-release comments toward Duvall were measured. He acknowledged Duvall's brilliance, but stressed he wouldn't revisit that level of unpredictability. Neither actor agreed to joint press tours, retrospectives, or reunion panels, an unusual absence for such a major film. Their careers continued upward, Redford as a director and festival founder, Duvall as an Oscar-winning powerhouse, but the opportunity for another cinematic reunion evaporated. The Natural endures as a beloved classic, ranked among ESPN's top 20 sports films and praised for its poetic tone. But the story behind its creation reveals how even celebrated collaborations can fracture under creative tension. The clash was born of two artists pursuing authenticity in divergent ways. Redford crafted a mythic, controlled narrative. Duvall pursued lived-in realism. Their clash across that Buffalo field became part of the film's legacy, proof that cinematic magic is often shaped by creative collisions and unresolved contrasts. Paul Newman, Charisma and the Slow Fade. In September 1968, at a rehearsal studio in New York City, Robert Redford, then a relative unknown, met Paul Newman, a superstar with multiple hits under his belt, when George Roy Hill brought them together for Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid. Released in 1969, the film grossed approximately $46 million domestically and another $50 million internationally by spring of 1970, making it one of the year's biggest box office successes. On screen, their chemistry shimmered. Newman as the effortless charm of Cassidy, Redford as the reserved wit of Sundance. Critics credited this contrast as a key element of the film's appeal, with William Goldman's Oscar-winning screenplay and Burt Bacharach's iconic Raindrops Keep Fallin' on My Head, cementing its status as a classic. Newman's support was instrumental. He urged the studio to cast Redford, even agreeing only after Redford secured the role. Newman recognized a synergy that extended beyond the script. "We bounce off each other real well," he remarked years later in BBC's Talking Pictures, calling Redford a blank sheet of paper whose presence, combined with Newman's energy, forged a compelling dynamic. Their rapport, part mentorship and part friendly rivalry, felt authentic and electric. They reunited in 1973 for The Sting, a Depression-era con artist caper directed again by Hill. With a $5.5 million budget, the film roared to success. $257 million global gross, 7 Oscar nominations, and wins for Best Picture and Best Director. Redford later explained that Newman, initially cast as Sundance, was perfectly suited to the comedic edge of Cassidy, enabling Redford to shine as Sundance. Yet beneath the box office triumphs, subtle tension crystallized by the second film. Newman, carrying star power and a new producer's influence, started to assert more creative control. On The Sting, he negotiated top billing, a $500,000 salary, and a percentage of profits, shifts that rebalanced the once even partnership. From Redford's vantage point, the collaboration had evolved. He stopped being my co-star and started being my competition. Redford immersed himself in behind-the-scenes work too, building Wildwood Enterprises in 1968 and laying the groundwork for the Sundance Film Festival, which championed independent storytelling and collaborative filmmaking. Newman, while maintaining his superstar status, was shifting into a more entrenched producer-star role, one that Redford began to perceive as competitive rather than collaborative. The growing friction wasn't explosive or scandalous, but as Redford later admitted, the warmth of their earlier rapport dulled. Where once their sets were characterized by playful teasing and shared dinners, by The Sting, the atmosphere had adopted something more formal, even strategic. A Washington Post report from 2023 noted that, even in relaxed environments, Newman's gregarious personality and Redford's reserved demeanor created a quiet tension. Their connection lingered in public anecdotes of camaraderie, such as ping-pong games, shared laughter on Lake Powell, and stories of Redford finding inventive ways to ride bicycles in Butch Cassidy. According to insiders, Newman teased Redford about tardiness, while Redford poked fun at Newman's penchant for beer and chain smoking. Attempts were made to recapture the magic. In the 1970s and early 1980s, Redford and Newman discussed future projects, even eyeing titles like The Man Who Would Be King and an adaptation of Bill Bryson's A Walk in the Woods. Redford later revived A Walk in the Woods in 2015 starring Nick Nolte, but Newman had passed away in 2008. In later years, Redford described Newman's evolution from co-star to competition, acknowledging that their distance wasn't born of anger, but of changed trust. There was no dramatic split, just two actors drifting apart as their creative ambitions and identities evolved. Offers circulated, but nothing aligned with the magic they had shared in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Paul Newman's death marked the definitive end of possible future collaborations. Yet their legacy endures. Two films that redefined buddy cinema, earned critical acclaim, and resonated with audiences across generations. Redford drew lines defined by temperament, respect, and artistic philosophy. He navigated his relationship with Newman with discretion, maintaining professional dignity and avoiding scandal, while privately recalibrating the dynamic. Theirs was not a saga of betrayal or bitterness. Instead, it was a quietly human story of evolving priorities and shifting roles. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.